You've come across a sports media podcast that hits different. It's got a varying flavor than the others that are out there. Where here on the Onto Something podcast, I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio, Tennis Channel, and other outlets. We focus on the human side of our guests, the personal angle as well, along with the X's and O's of those in our industry and sports media, their career and their resume. But it's about having those hard-hitting, deep conversations that expand beyond just the arena of work. What a treat we've got for you today. Fred Gaudelli just wrapped up his 33rd and final season as a lead producer for NBC Sunday Night Football. He joins me. And before we get this thing underway, don't forget to subscribe. Here's my chat with Fred. It is time to welcome in Fred Gaudelli, who has done a lot in the business of sports media. Maybe not most notably, but when he got started, he was an airport picker-upper of talent, and he's done just a few things in the business ever since then. He joins me on the On Sunday podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley with different media outlets, Tennis Channel, and Fox Sports Radio, to name a few. Fred obviously spending more than 30 years in the NFL, executive producer, and most recently with NBC. We, as you know, Fred, we're going to talk about your career, but we're going to go well beyond that. You've done a lot of interviews about your career, but I also want to focus on your human side, the personal side, you being a father. So we're going to get the full version of you outside of work. Not sure how many interviews that you've done have gone that way, but we're going to do that, and we're going to have a lot of fun. Excited to have you on. Thanks for doing this.
Well, hey, I look forward to discussing fatherhood. It's one of the great things about life.
What is it about fatherhood, the joy that it brings you, that most resonates with you as we get started here?
Well, I mean, just the fact that it's a joy that never subsides, from the minute you first see your child. And, I saw mine emerge from my then wife. I mean, it's, indescribable. And sure, there's better days than others, but that love and that kind of joy just never subsides, and when you look at your child and, now my child's in college, I don't get to look at her as much as I used to, but, I obviously have a lot of pictures of her around my house. And before I go to bed, I always look at one, just to see her. And yeah, I would always say, and I've said this many times, she's the best thing that's ever happened to me, and that will never change.
Now, that is true. What about her saying that about you, you being the best thing that has happened to her? If I were to ask her that and she were to say that, what about that would she describe as why that is?
Well, we've had this great bond, almost from like the beginning. Even though I got divorced, when she was 5 years old, her mom and I got along. We lived like a mile apart. So she never had that kind of stress, between two divorced parents. But, we took, vacations, just she and I, alone every year from the time she was like, 3 years old. And, for the first, 10 years, it was, mostly United States domestic travel. But then as she got older, we started venturing into Europe and places like that where I think she would appreciate it more and understand it more. So those trips, were fantastic. Every single one of them, was great. And, not that there was any like these deep, hard conversations or things like that, but you start to enjoy each other's company. And, look, I was proud she got to the college she wanted to go to, and I knew that means she would be leaving. But the hard part was, not seeing her every day. And, we talk a lot about the pandemic. Her mom is immunocompromised. So I had her for like 4 straight months every single day, not leaving the house other than to go outside and exercise. And, I know the pandemic was tragic in, almost every single way, but there was a benefit for her and I because, she was 16 years old. We ate 3 meals together for 4 months, which that was never, ever going to happen. That was not in anyone's plan. And I think it even made us closer.
What were those conversations like, you and her at the dinner table, when you guys were able to share meals together?
Well, there were a lot of things, a lot of, she was curious from like the moment she arrived. So she always had a lot of questions about a lot of things. Things would be in the news. It could be anything from, President Obama, President Trump, President Biden. It could be about music, movies. I mean, obviously, sports, but my daughter loves going to games and taking part in that. But she didn't love sports. I mean, she played a little bit until she was about, 8 or 9 years old. And her real passion was singing and dancing and acting. And so we took in a lot of Broadway shows and we talked a lot about that. So a lot of it was about interest, interesting things. A lot of it was spirit, some, not a lot of it, some of it was spiritual. Her mom and I had a different philosophy, on God and all that, where I was very much a believer. Her mom is not, so she would have a lot of questions about that. And I would just, give her my point of view without, you know, commenting one way or the other on her mom's point of view. So, it really ran the gamut of silliness to seriousness, and all of it was a lot of fun.
How would you separate and look at the love you have for your family
Mhm.
and compare that to the love you have for the business that you've thrived in?
Yeah, the business, after, 40 some odd years, that love is kind of ebbed. I mean, I'm just being perfectly honest. I mean, I've accomplished, I'm so fortunate to have accomplished what I accomplished. I got to work with great people that really paved a lot of that success for me. But that's what I do. That's not really who I am. Your family is who you are. And I would expect, when you're counting down the minutes of your life, you're going to be thinking a lot more about, what you did with your family or what you didn't do with your family versus what you did with your career or what you didn't do with your career. So, one provides the means, and then the other one is the product and, the thing that I am most grateful for.
For you, where do you sense that you get your most validation from a family standpoint? You talked about spending those 4 months with your daughter and that time, that priceless time that maybe you did not foresee would happen at the beginning of COVID and the pandemic, but the validation that you get from your daughter and your family as a whole, where do you feel that the most inside of you?
Well, I think when you see them make decisions or achieve or fail, and you see their response or their approach, and you can tell, okay, she was listening, or she observed this. Because one thing about observation, I don't care who you are, right? We've all had bosses. We all have bosses. I've been fortunate. I've had tremendous bosses, and I've been a boss. But there's always things about your boss that you want to emulate, and there's things about your boss that you don't want to emulate. And that would be true for the people that work for me, and that would be true for my daughter. I'm sure she saw my work ethic. She saw my commitment. She saw that, for the most part, that I had priorities in order. So she saw the good things, and then I'm sure she saw things like, yeah, I don't want to be like that. Like there were things about my dad that I didn't want to do, or my mom that I didn't want to be like. So I think it's that power of observation, and then when you see it manifest itself in your kids, like one of the things that I'm really proudest about my daughter is like she is extremely kind
Aw.
and cares about people and cares about people's feelings, to a much greater degree than I ever did. That makes me really proud. Uh, and again, I'm sure a lot of that comes from her mom as well. But that's one of the things about her, that I truly admire and love the most.
What a gift is that she
Yeah.
could teach you so much, that you learn so much from your
Yep.
daughter, and the way in which you're able to see the world a little bit differently thanks to her. You talked about how there are things about your parents that you want to emulate, that you have,
Mhm.
but that are also different. If we go back to your childhood
Mhm.
and we see what you were like, where do you see some of the qualities of your own daughter showing up in a young version of Fred Gaudelli?
Well, I think and I'm not even sure how I learned this or who instilled it in me, but from a very early age, I had this great sense of loyalty. Loyalty to friends, loyalty to family, loyalty to people that you would work with. That if somebody had really extended themselves for you for whatever reason, whether it was work related, play related, team related, that I would always try. I would never forget that, and I would always look to reciprocate that whenever the opportunity came. And she also has that. And like I said, I don't know how that was instilled in me, but I do know from an early age that's how I felt.
Fred Gaudelli is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. How you felt in terms of your work ethic, you've described that and how it's powered you through the course of your career. As your daughter was growing up, how much of your work ethic was tied to her and want to be a good impression for her to make her proud as one of the driving factors for what you were able to do in continuing to climb the ranks as you did in the business?
Yeah, that's always that's kind of the Rubik's cube, right? Because you're never really sure if you're applying it, evenly, or with the same kind of intensity all the time. But I tried to explain to her what my job entailed, and then I tried to explain to her all the benefits she would receive, for me to, succeed at my job. And then I tried to explain what the sacrifices would be. And so we would have those honest conversations. And I said, look, the benefits here are going to be unique. There's not a lot of kids your age who are going to be, going to the last practice the day before the Super Bowl of the Seattle Seahawks, and standing with Richard Sherman and Russell Wilson and taking pictures. There's not a lot of kids that are gonna, walk onto the field at Yankee Stadium and meet Jorge Posada and Mariano Rivera and Derek Jeter, whatever. So I said, look, those are things that are going to be afforded to you, because of what I do. So you're going to have to accept that, at 8 o'clock on Monday night, I'm saying good night to you because I've got about 4 hours of work to do here, and then our football season, I'm going to be gone, 5 days a week. And you know what? She at a very early age kind of understood it. I'm not sure she loved it all the time, but she did get to reap all those benefits. I was on, she definitely, she saw that. And at the end of the day, I think she would say that, and again, we would take the time to take trips together where it was just the two of us without dealing with work. So I think she would, say that it was, now she's pursuing the same business. She's not sports per se, but she wants to work in some type of media production, and and she's studying this in school, and she's kind of seeing now. Well, she saw the commitment, but now she's living it on her own.
That's so cool to see that the way in which you've been able to influence what she is doing and how far she's come. Fred Gaudelli is with me. Of course, I'm Bryan Fenley. Of all the years in this business for you, Fred, how much time have you now had to reflect compared to how much time you actually reflected when you were in the throes of the business?
Yeah, I didn't reflect very much in the throws, but now, that I'm no longer going to be producing games and I'm overseeing, the Sunday night show and the Thursday night show. Yeah, I mean, you have a chance to reflect. I mean, the only times that I reflected, was when, you would have like, the Emmy night, or something like that, where you look back on the year and what you accomplished and, that type of thing. But when you're doing Sunday night football or last year Thursday night with a brand new partner starting it from scratch, your focus really needs to be forward, and what the work that needs to be done and how to make it better and how to make it, distinctive and all those different things. But now that I'm not planning for a season right now, I'm really kind of a resource to the two gentlemen who are producing Sunday and Thursday, yeah, you get to look. It's the first time I won't be producing a game, since 1987. So yeah, you get to look back and think about how lucky you were.
Lucky, and then what about the pride? Where does the pride come in? Because the awards are there and you're self-centered and you're humble, but when you are able to think about what you've done, what about what you've done perks you up the most and makes you most proud of yourself internally without that validation from other people and the awards and the recognition that you got?
Well, I mean, I'd say a couple of things. I didn't really cut any corners. I took it head on, and I worked really, really hard to try to make the shows as good as I can make them. And when Monday night went away from me and Drew Esikoff and Al Michaels and John Madden, and we went over to Sunday night, I don't think any of us had any inkling that Sunday night would become as huge as it became. And it was, a large part of that was because of all the work that we did, so, there's pride in that. But I also have a lot of, people that worked for me that went on to do great things, and still, will call me and, talk about our time together and how much it meant. And that's really rewarding when you can have a positive influence on other people, and they think that your time together was instrumental in their success. So I definitely take a lot of pride in that. And just like I said, it was all about the work. It wasn't about any flash or sizzle, or there wasn't anything fraudulent about it. Is another way to say it. I mean, it was good, honest work, and I was fortunate to work with great people who sometimes took an idea I had and made it, 1,000 times better than I could have imagined.
Honest work, great work. But what about that work made you feel most sort of like a celebrity?
Well, I mean, I don't know that I ever felt like a celebrity or ever will, but when your show like Sunday Night Football, keeps getting recognized in a myriad of different ways and really recognized for excellence, you're a part of something special. And in this case, I was leading something special, but I was surrounded by special people who had a similar work ethic, who had their own unique talents. And, we all, the stars aligned. We all came together at the right time, at the right place, at the right moment, and it worked. And that there's a lot of pride in that. And look, I understand there's a lot of luck in that too, because I've been around long enough to know the role that luck plays. But just really proud and grateful for that.
How are you spending? Not to say that you have right now, Fred, a little bit of extra free time, because
Right,
considering that you're still working a lot with
right,
NBC and everything they're doing,
right.
but it can be so hard for colleagues in this business to not to take a back seat, because you're certainly not doing that, but to allow
But I am.
themselves, but in a way you are.
Yeah,
So
I am.
how hard has that been? Because obviously this was what you wanted. You wanted to transition in this way in your career, but
Mhm.
to be able to be okay with taking a bit of a back seat when, like you said, it's work ethic, it's travel, it's nonstop. Mentally, how are you processing this stage of your life now as you head into a new frontier?
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the things I really thought long and hard about was what you just asked me. Like, okay, so how are you going to do this? And the one thing that I really wanted to be settled on was, hey, I did all these NFL games from 1990 to 2022 and into January of 2023. That's my record. I can't change that record. No one else can change that record. I'm happy with that record. And no matter what happens afterward, that record cannot be altered. So, I really thought about that. I'm like, okay, so I'm fine with that. I'm fine about, what I was able to achieve. And then, there comes a time, at least I believe this, and then really there's two parts to this, but um, it's time for somebody else to take the wheel. Somebody a little younger, somebody a little fresher, somebody with more energy, someone who's going to look at it differently than you have. Because when you accumulate all those years, and even though I made it a priority not to try to do the same things I did every year, inevitably you are repeating things that you've done prior, and then I don't want to say your mind shuts off, but um, you may not be looking at it as peripherally as you should, and that's where new talented blood comes in, and then I can be an enormous resource for them because I can take away some of the stuff that kind of creeps into your ability to be creative or your ability to think that way. I know, the best 5 years of my career as a producer was when I worked for Dick Ebersol, the first 5 years of Sunday Night Football, because he handled the relationship with the league. He handled the relationship with sales. He handled the relationship with marketing. He just said, "Hey, you produce the game. I want you to produce the best game of the week, and I'll handle the rest." And so, as I now transition into that, I reflect upon those 5 years, and I'm hopeful I can be that for Rob Hyland on Sunday Night Football and Mark Titleman on Thursday Night Football.
You've been a mentor for so many. You talked about that. You mentioned loyalty and how important that is to you as far as your friend group, but the ability for you to think about those who you've worked with, and I think about the likes of John Madden and somebody who has had a profound effect on all of us. And certainly you have had experiences with him that no other has had. What were the last words you said to John?
Well, it was Christmas Day of 2021, and I had obtained a screener version of the
Oh,
Fox documentary that they had done on his broadcasting career, I should say. And I remember watching it in my hotel room in Dallas. We were in Dallas for a Sunday night game. I remember watching the whole thing, and then Christmas, or actually the day after Christmas is John's wedding anniversary. So I texted him. We were texting back and forth about the show, how much I had loved it, and then I said to him, "Hey, and happy anniversary, to you in Virginia." And he replied, "Thanks, Fred. Merry Christmas to everyone. I'll be watching tonight." And so those were the texts. Those were the last, I don't know if they were words spoken, but they were words written. Speaking got a little bit tougher toward the end of his life, not because he was, failing, but he had suffered an autoimmune deficiency in hearing, and hearing got to be, really arduous for him. So texting kind of became the best way to communicate with him. But I would just say, so much of my success I owe to John Madden, obviously because he was in my booth for 7 years. But again, if you want to learn by observing, you could learn a lot by observing John Madden and, how to be successful and all those things. So he's a guy I think about quite often. I miss him very much, and nothing but I just feel blessed to have had those 7 years working together, and then the next 13 years, just being friends.
when do you find yourself, Fred, thinking about him most to this day?
Um, you know, John had a line for everything, and every line was an education. So when something happens, bam, he'll pop into my mind. You know what I mean? Because I know what Madden would say right here. And again, all you had to do was like kind of watch, observe, and listen. And he would say things, and when you thought about what he was saying, it made all the sense in the world, and he was 100% correct. So anytime a situation would come up, like if we're comparing two things, And these two things really aren't comparable. John's line was, that's an ace over a deuce. So right away he was letting you know, no, no, that's not a comparison. Okay. So there's, there's 100 lines like that one that he would just insert into the conversation whenever it seemed most appropriate.
You feel his words constantly in your mind, and he's one of the many great colleagues that you've had, and obviously this business has lost a few great minds over the years. How do you, and you're talking about how you keep John Madden's spirit alive within you, but when you think of others who have fallen in the business, friends, those who have meant so much to you, how also, what are your tactics to keeping them alive and their memories and helping you and sort of powering you through your days?
Ones that are still with us or no longer with
No
us.
longer with us.
Again, a lot of it just comes down to you might be thinking about a certain event that you did, and what that person did on that event or said on that event. Um, the one thing about history is not fair. The influential, instrumental people often don't get all the credit they deserve for what becomes a really successful operation. So I'll take ESPN, for example. So I was at ESPN, it was 3 years old, and the production group was led by two men, Scotty Connell, who's no longer with us, and Bill Fitz, my first boss, who's 91 years old and, still spitting fire. Completely with it and just phenomenal. And I think about those guys often, and whenever I get an opportunity to extol what they meant to the, people see ESPN now, this enormous success story, but I don't think it's an exaggeration to say without Scotty and without Bill, ESPN never maybe doesn't get off the ground, and they're lost. They get lost in the history. When they're the founding fathers, you know what I mean? And for some reason they're not maybe thought of as such or treated as such. So, I mean, I'm always, whenever I get the opportunity, and there's other people at ESPN just like that. And, I don't know if you saw the play Hamilton, but the last scene of Hamilton, they're talking about how Alexander Hamilton got lost, in the history of America and the success of America. And there's a song and there's a line, and George Washington's singing the line, and he's saying, "Hey, one thing I learned is you have no control who lives or dies, who tells your story. And if people aren't going to tell your story, then you're probably going to be forgotten." And that's where luck comes in, and again, and timing. Without those two men, ESPN maybe doesn't get off the ground. Maybe it doesn't make it. But ESPN turns into this enormous success story. And at least as far as I'm concerned, their contributions aren't as remembered as they should be.
How can we change that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I said, who gets to write the history? That's always the bottom line. Who is writing the history? When they wrote the history of ESPN, Jim Miller wrote a great book. These guys
True.
have all the fun. I know myself and a few other of my colleagues who were with me at the time, we made sure that he understood, ESPN didn't start in 1987. ESPN started in 1979. ESPN didn't start in the 90s. There were a lot of things that happened. There were a lot of people that really uh, went the extra 20 miles to get ESPN to where it is right now. So, I think when you have opportunities like that, and I also think understanding, I've been like lucky beyond belief in the credit that I've been given. And um, again, I was in the right place at the right time under the right circumstances. And you can never lose sight of that. And like I said, it was made vivid for me by the way these two people, in my mind, aren't given the credit that they deserve.
I think we can all feel that gratitude that you have and the way in which you speak about those who made that profound effect on you. And like you said, aren't getting that recognition that they deserve. You said over 20 miles. I feel like that maybe that was the trip that it took for you to pick up Dickie V at the airport back in 1982. I'm taking 20 miles that you're saying in that last answer,
Yeah.
applying it to the next question. Here you are just getting into the business and you were assigned to pick up Dickie V at the airport. What did you think was going to happen? And then what ultimately happened during that car ride in your experiences?
Well, so at that point, I had picked up quite a few people. Jim Simpson, who was ESPN's lead announcer, Bud Wilkinson, who was our college football analyst, former, great Oklahoma coach, ran for the Senate. Paul McGuire. I had picked up quite a few people, and Dick Howser at the time was the manager of the Royals, but had managed the Yankees. That was my team growing up. So I had all these great experiences, and they were all somewhat similar as you get in the car and you start talking. But with Dick, so I'm at the gate, I'm wearing my little red ESPN jacket. He comes bounding off the plane. Hey, you my driver? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, hey, take these bags, meet me downstairs. So I grab his bags. All of a sudden he gets into the car, he's got a stack of newspapers, and he's like just rifling through these newspapers. And I'm like, and he's in the back seat. And usually the other guys, everybody sat in the front seat. No
Yeah.
one ever sat in the back seat. So he's in the back seat. And I'm like, hey, what are you doing with all those papers? What do you mean, what am I doing? I go, you're like, what are you looking for? He goes, well, what am I looking for? I'm looking for my name. You know, I'm like, oh, okay. And then, so we have this. So it was, I didn't know what to make of. I honestly didn't know what to make of him. Then I became a regular driver of his. Then ultimately I became his producer. We became great friends. We're still great friends. We text all the time together. What I love and appreciate about Dick Vitale more than anything else is he was a guy that stumbled into extreme fame and took that fame to do something really, really noble, and that's to raise money for kids with cancer. And he is relentless about raising this money, for kids with cancer. I've seen it firsthand. I've lived it the years I was on the road with him. I mean, he could have stopped, he could have stopped at any point. He will not stop. He will not stop till it's over. Either cancer's over or he's over. I'll always, always appreciate and love him for that.
He's got such a zest for life.
Uh,
And so where do you feel like you, Fred, in a way share, or where does your own version of Dickie V, where do you feel like that comes out within you in your life?
Yeah, that's a good question. These guys like Dick, they dedicate all their, time and their life, to this mission. And I'm kind of still looking for that mission. Now, I try to help people. I am very philanthropic, but philanthropic is, money, and money isn't time, and money isn't, self-sacrifice and all that. But I'm still, that's one of the things that I hope is going to be a byproduct of, taking a step back is okay. Now, how else can you make an impact to help, to help people, or, to give people an opportunity maybe that you have that they wouldn't ordinarily have. So my honest answer to that is I'm looking for it.
That's so fascinating. You're still looking for it after all that you've achieved. And as we wrap up this conversation, Fred, I got to say, with your resume, I'm thinking way at the top, it is award-winning chauffeur, award-winning car driver of talent. No, I mean, it's fascinating to learn those stories and then to see how your career was able to blossom from there. Fred, we could do this again. I could continue to talk. Love your storytelling, love your story. And I cannot wait to see what's coming up next for you in your career, this new chapter. It's going to be really exciting.
This was a lot of fun for me. I don't usually get to talk about these types of things, and they're obviously, the most important things in your life. So, Brian, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Fred Gaudelli, I'm Bryan Fenley. This has been a fun one where we go beyond just the surface of Fred and learn about him on a deep level. Fred, thanks again. Really appreciate it.
All right. Take care, Brian.